Welcome to NFL Daily, where we just keep crossing the names off the best available free agents list, except for that one guy. I'm Gregg Rosenthal, here in the Chris Wesseling podcast studio with my friend Patrick Claybon, who has timed the finish of his sandwich that he inhaled in the last minute and a half perfectly for the top of the show.
I wouldn't say that. It was poorly planned, much like that one quarterback who I don't think counts. I don't think we need to cross the name off. The list was great without him, and was great without him.
Oh, wow. You love my top 101 free agents list that you're saying Aaron Rodgers sullies it. He wasn't on it initially, but he is on there now as number 25, which would be the third best available.
Yeah, of course we have to adjust for franchise tags and all of those other things, and that doesn't harm the integrity of the list. The list is the list. But all of this chicanery is so unnecessary that I feel like it sullies the list, and it changes a number that doesn't deserve to be changed.
Wow. Yeah, we only have 5 guys left out of the top 50. One of them is visiting my New England Patriots. More on that. One just got signed. More on that in a second. But let's start the news. This is a news show, ultimately.
Okay.
I come from a news background, I would say.
I've done news updates.
Roto World.
10 years.
I just loved grinding that news. Pro Football Talk.
How many blurbs?
Here, Around the League was the original name of our news blog at the NFL, then Around the NFL. How many blurbs?
Yeah, how many blurbs do you think you amassed during your time?
Between Roto World and Pro Football Talk?
Just at Roto World.
I mean, I don't know. It would have to be over 10,000. 50,000? You'd have to do the math on how many.
I mean, according to a famous grifter, that makes you an expert at it.
Yeah, I think at this point, I was an expert by the end. That's why I had to get out. There's nothing left to learn. The NFL is still trying to learn. They're still trying to change. They're still trying to improve the rules in which they play the sport. They're always changing. And some of the rules proposals officially made by teams that will be talked about at the league meeting coming up at the end of this month that got some people's attention. When it came out, the Lions proposed that seedings would just be based on record, so you would not automatically be a top 4 seed for the playoffs. The Lions also suggested killing the idea of a holding penalty on defense being an automatic first down. Those are spicy. Those were new. I'm curious if you like them.
I like one of them.
Okay, which one?
I like the true playoff seeding. It makes the most sense is the seeds actually determining based on the record. And I think you would lose, right? You would lose some matchups. It's tough to go back. I already don't want to go back to the 16 playoff editions and try to retroactively because it makes it – all the math gets fundamentally changed. All I care about, because it's not college football. It's not vibes-based. The teams start the season and they know what they need to do ultimately to accomplish things. Right, so if we want to go back and retroactively say, well, this would have changed that, no, it wouldn't, because each season is its own thing. But I think it incentivizes some of those late season matchups.
Yeah,
where folks who cares? Why are we if it's cross conference game and teams are solid in their division? Who cares? But prioritizing the record just makes things better for everything. So I'm fine with that. The holding thing, I think it places say it's a 3rd and 14.
Yeah.
It incentivizes grabbing somebody because then you got a 3rd and 9, and it's hey, make them call it. Maybe they call it. I think it leads to more penalties. I don't want to see more penalties. I just want to see the penalties be right. And the more they call, the more they're going to be wrong.
Usually when the teams propose these, they're long shots, so we don't need to go too crazy diving deep unless they happen. It is funny that the Lions, commit as many holding penalties.
Terrion Arnold.
it's call it the Terrion Arnold penalty if it happens. See, you made a good argument because that holding call also just bothers you though on a 3rd and 25 and it's a ticky-tack little holding and suddenly they have I don't know what the right solution is.
Getting it right. Getting it right is the right solution.
Yeah, but that's an impossible. That will never be fixed in terms of getting that exactly right. That one I don't think is going to happen. I like the seedings.
Yeah.
I like changing it. People say that's taking away the sanctity of the divisions. No. If you win your lousy division, you still get to go to the playoffs. So it keeps those big-time division races that we've seen where the division's not that good and it's 8-9 versus 9-8. It's still huge to go make the playoffs. That's what every team is trying to do. But it does reward, like last year, it would have helped out the Lions division rivals, the Minnesota Vikings, and they would have had a higher seed. And I'm fine with that because of the other effects of, yes, like a team that's winning a poorer division might have to play in week 18 to try to keep their spot. And I like that. Anything that encourages playing all the way through the end of the season, I think is a good thing.
And you still, if you win your division, you get the tiebreaker if you finish with the same record, which happens all of the time. And so like there's still incentive to win your division. You just don't, like you don't have these good teams that really get shafted and they have to go on the road and play a game that a lot of times they lose.
I've done no reporting on this. I feel like that has a shot. You got to get 24 teams to agree to that. Another one that we hadn't talked about on the show previously, because they're trying to ban the tush push. That's not going to happen. They're not going to make that illegal. They're trying to make the overtime rules like the regular season, where it's 15 minutes and that each team gets the ball. I'm fine with that. Give it a shot for a year. There's so few overtime games. Extra 5 minutes, that's fine. Each team getting the ball, it's fine. If you don't want to have to play so long, don't go to overtime. Just go for 2.
I like it because they simplified the field goal chicanery. It's just, hey, 15 minutes, couple possessions, that's it. It's universal. I have a basketball bias. I would like to see just a period of time and then, hey, play this period of time. And if a team wants to try to run clock and then score, like, okay, you got to stop them. That would be my perfect solution.
Yeah, I also remember that moment in the Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the 49ers where all of America, including myself, for a second, especially because I was at the stadium not listening, I was like, wait, do the Chiefs have to score here before the end of the night? No, they don't, right? They don't, right? But I'm just like, it was breaking my brain at the time. And they did score just in time if it mattered, and it didn't. All right, let's talk Rodgers just quickly. So I mentioned this on 40s and free agents. It's been a lot of fun prepping for the draft with Daniel Jeremiah. We're doing it every week, and we did mention the Aaron Rodgers, but we didn't focus on it too much. And this is going to be a draft show. I should have mentioned we're talking to our friend Adam from the Saints Block Party podcast, who's at the Big Ten Pro Day, much like Jeremiah, and we're going to talk to him in a little bit about some prospects there. But the Rodgers news that he's not going to Minnesota, Tom Pelissero said the Steelers and the Giants are still very much interested in him. The Vikings aren't totally closing the door. They're basically saying, like, yeah, if he's still out there much later in the offseason and it made more sense to us then, like, you never know. I have a feeling, and Jordan Rodriguez had this theory, that it was almost like Kevin O'Connell trying to be nice, and being nice publicly. This is how they're speaking to Aaron Rodgers publicly. They're like, bro, if you really don't want to play for those two teams, like, who knows what could happen in August, but we're not really rolling with you. So you got to pick the Steelers or the Giants. Meanwhile, the Vikings reportedly rejected some calls that came to them on J.J. McCarthy.
I'm far more interested in who the teams were that called for J.J. McCarthy, because it wouldn't make sense for the Vikings to be in the game of getting rid of the quarterback that they drafted in the first round that they never got to see play.
You know what the rumor that this is not a thing. This is not a thing that even people are talking about, but I think it was just like a fan-created thing. People have been trying to ship Herbert to the Vikings for McCarthy for like a year. There's no reason to believe that the Chargers would actually want to do that, but somehow I think that's like Schefter addressed it at one point last year. He didn't say that. I think he was just saying this was wishful thinking, that like somehow Jim Harbaugh loves JJ so much that, and they don't really throw the ball much with the Chargers, and that the Vikings would pick up Justin Herbert in exchange. And it's like...
Have those people heard Harbaugh discuss Justin Herbert?
Right. Or looked at the contract that Herbert has. It'd be very difficult to trade him because of the cap ramifications. You'd have to do it after June 1st. Yeah, I don't know who those teams that would call. Maybe the Browns were just like, hey, man, that would make sense to me. If I was the Browns, I would be like, hey, you want to just pay Darnold and we'll give you like some good draft picks for J.J. McCarthy? And they're like, no, that would make sense as a call.
Yeah, or the two teams that are in this infernal Rodgers waiting game where it's, and I'm wondering why tell Tom Pelissero that they're not interested in Aaron Rodgers at this time? Like that added addendum like has this ominous tone to it where it's like, oh, so they're out of the game for now. So like, were you in the game?
I think it's saying they're out of the game, and they're doing it respectfully enough where they're trying not to make it sound like they're just shutting the door on this guy. And there is... I don't know, because
Why?
Kevin O'Connell
Like the
just
first thing Ben Johnson does when he
loves
gets to Chicago is
quarterbacks.
take shots across the division. But the idea is the Vikings like have to be super nice to Aaron Rodgers for who?
I think Kevin O'Connell sees himself as the patron saint of quarterbacks, and he just loves quarterbacks and wants to build them up. I don't know what they're laughing at in the back, Eric. What's going on?
Now that we got a good reaction shot of Patrick on the monitor.
See, this is good advertisement to check out the NFL Daily YouTube. Subscribers, oh yeah, they're going up lately, so appreciate y'all checking it out. There was also a mention from Pelissero, who's really been leading the Vikings reporting
right
out
now.
there. Minnesota, that's his home, saying that the Steelers would be comfortable starting Mason Rudolph, basically, if they had to.
I can't think of a better endorsement for these people who are Rodgers averse in Pittsburgh than hearing somebody say, "Oh, they're okay with Mason Rudolph." I think that will change some chemistry in people's brains. Well, maybe this whole thing isn't that bad.
Well, if they went into the draft without another quarterback on the roster, it just means they're taking a quarterback. Now, whether that's in the first round or the second round, you're at a point where you just have to. I feel like they probably have to regardless. The Vikings, by the way, also signed Rondale Moore, and I mentioned that he's a Cardinals receiver who missed all of last season. I mentioned that just specifically because I noticed last night that Rondale Moore's signing with the Vikings was either third or fourth, I believe, on the ESPN.com stack.
Okay.
I mentioned them not as a rival, but they include all sports. There's an NCAA tournament going on. There's the end of the NBA season. And Rondale Moore was third in what we would call in the news business in their stack. If that's not a sign that people are hungry for NFL news any time of year, I don't know what is.
That is a sign of the machine that is Purdue football, is what it is. But honestly, he was top 5 in the league in yards after a catch, right? The average depth of target, because I was a Rondale guy.
Okay.
Was about a yard shorter than Debo, but some of that we can attribute to the Cardinals and kind of their flailings, where we missed a chance for an unleashed Rondale with the injury last year with the Falcons. I like this. I like this a lot.
As you're saying it, it got me thinking he's a better version, the rich man's version of Brandon Powell, who's actually had a nice career, and the Vikings turned into a very good role player over the last few years. Rondale, I think, is more talented, so you could see him elevating and being a nice little third receiver for them. Danielle Hunter got a contract extension, adding $35 million to his contract. He only had 1 year left, so what this did was bought them a little time, gave him a ton of money for this year, didn't want to give him a huge long-term deal, but he's also getting paid $55 million over the next 2 years, so he's happy about it. He just got a big raise, and it also clarifies to us that Danielle Hunter, definitely a swarm guy, special work ethic, and relentless mindset. Now, the problem with swarm, as our friend Seth Payne has pointed out, and I am one of the Seth heads out there, like our friend Jordan. Special work ethic and relentless mindset, just being swarm ignores ethic. It just ignores it, just takes it out. So,
well, yeah,
it's not ideal.
It's like, are we creating an A?
No, they're just taking special work that in this case they're counting and relentless mindset.
Okay,
but he's definitely a swarm guy.
Are we counting the and in action?
If you're going to make that the guiding force to your whole organization, I'm going to need to work on, you're going to need to work on the spelling or just clarify it. If I ever get a chance to interview D'Amico Ryans, I am going to ask about that. I think he would find it funny, or he would think I was a little jerk. The Texans signed Cam Robinson to a 1 year, $12 million contract as well, so that probably is their left tackle next year. Titus Howard then is either a swing tackle or you move him to guard, but it's just really asking a lot out of their offensive line and their new offensive coach to improve this offensive line. It doesn't look great on paper. Tevin Jenkins is leaving a troubled offensive line in Chicago. He signed with the Cleveland Browns. That was how I started the show, that you're just picking off the guys in the top 100. Cam Robinson and Tevin Jenkins were the top two offensive linemen left. You actually have to go down to number 83, Brandon Scherf. Whew. Now, it is now hard to find an offensive lineman, so the Browns signed Tevin Jenkins, might as well. And in other Browns news, Mary Kay Cabot said there was mutual interest between the Browns and Carson Wentz, which
Somebody out there for everybody.
It would be an
On both sides.
amazing turnaround after they didn't draft him back in 2016. It's
I mean, how different would the world be if Carson Wentz was drafted by the Cleveland Browns?
Yeah, would the Eagles have taken? No, because they traded up for one specifically. They wouldn't have taken Garrett, but that who knows where Myles Garrett would have landed. It kind of reminds me of one of those relationships that's like it didn't work out maybe in high school or college, but then you see each other 10 years later, and maybe you're not in as good a position as you were, and it's like, all right, let's settle.
A rousing endorsement for the Carson Wentz era in Cleveland.
Tevin Jenkins, good pickup. I thought it was interesting. Uchenna Nwosu took a big pay cut. It's been pay cut season. There's actually been a lot of these reports out there. We're not going to hit every single one, but the Saints got a number of their players to actually take a true pay cut in terms of staying. Taysom Hill, by the way, still on that roster. Definitely not going to be under that contract that he's on, but still on that roster. I bet he'll take a pay cut or do something at some point. But Nwosu took like a $6-7 million pay cut to stay with the Seahawks. A little surprising. And then he also had to give up his number to Cooper Kupp. Tough week.
Yeah.
I guess he got a donation from Kupp, to his charitable foundation.
I hope so. While I'm taking an actual pay cut, maybe not just a donation. Maybe a little something.
That one's tricky because if I had to pick who's going to be better on the Seahawks in 2025, I would go Nwosu. He has more juice left.
Yeah.
And it's not like Kupp. Well, Kupp is a great player. I guess I was trying to make a line of like, is he like a locked-in Hall of Famer? That's not the line you would call, but.
And in terms of the jersey, like, are the Seahawks fans who cheered against Cooper Kupp for all these years, are they really running out there to buy a Cooper Kupp?
I think because of the Washington ties, and he was wearing the Pearl Jam T-shirt to the press conference. I think there's going to be some Kupp jerseys. Yes. Because of the Washington ties. He's a local guy. Stephon Diggs, who I alluded to at the top, is meeting with the Patriots. We'll talk more about that if that deal happens. He's coming back from a torn ACL, but that's a worthwhile shot for a team that has too much cap space. Jahad Campbell, who DJ projected going top 10 in his latest mock draft to the Saints, underwent shoulder surgery, unfortunately, and it could jeopardize his status for the start of the season. That is one that could affect his draft stock. Pretty much universally believed to be the best off-ball linebacker in this draft. You're an Alabama guy. Do you have any Campbell take?
Well, I honestly think because of the off-ball, and this is something DJ has said a whole bunch that I have completely bought into, is the benefit of drafting the talented off-ball linebacker guy doesn't necessarily happen early. There's just so much to learn and grow at that particular position that you generally end up waiting for things to pay off, to where, like, I don't know if missing the first 3 weeks of the rookie season, if you're planning on taking a guy and having potentially 5 years of control, that it's worth, oh yeah, we gotta find a different player. You want the player if you want the prospect.
That's a great point. And DJ's really pumping up Campbell as a potential edge guy, that he thinks he might have it as much edge juice or logic to it as Jalen Walker did. There just wasn't enough spots there because of all the great edges that have been there. And so if you're telling me he's a little Zach Bond-like, where you're moving him back and forth, everyone wants a Zach Bond now. Zach Bond is the new Debo. Remember there was like a year everyone wanted a new Debo? There's no other Debos? Yeah. I really think people kind of want a Zach Bond.
We're probably gonna be waiting for a while to get that new Debo. And I'm sure we're going to be waiting for a while to get that Zach Bond. I like Jahad Campbell, honestly, rushing the passer more than like trying to change directions and sort through traffic and stuff like that. And if you got a guy that can go get the quarterback, that you want him doing that thing.
All right. And before we take a break, and we're going to let Adam West join us on the show. Excited to talk a little prospects with him, some draft stuff, a little bit of Saints stuff. He had a pretty spicy Saints report I have to ask him about. Just a couple nuggets before we go to break. Michael Gallup is back in the NFL. Congratulations to him. If you remember, former Cowboys receiver, had a lot of injuries, a former around the NFL guest at training camp with the Cowboys. He decided after retiring for a year to come back to the NFL, so he's with a familiar face in Dan Quinn. He's joining the Commanders. The Rams brought back cornerback Akello Witherspoon, who's done nice work for them the last couple of years. Devin Duvernay Duvernay, the special teamer, is joining the Bears, probably a return guy there. And then the Dolphins signed Willie Gay, former Saint, and the Falcons signed Jordan Fuller, who's bounced around a little bit, but solid safety, used to be with the Rams and the Panthers. We will take a quick break here. And yes, on the other side, some fun topics. Shedeur Sanders. He was in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Some Derek Carr heat. This report, we're taking it national. I don't know if people are ready for this one.
Very hot.
Back on NFL Daily. Still here in the studio with my friend Patrick, but welcoming in one of our favorite guests. It's Adam West of the Saints Block Party podcast. He's not just a Saints guy, he's a draft guy. Boots on the ground, our Big 12 Pro Day correspondent. And yes, if you happen to listen to 40s and Free Agents with Daniel Jeremiah, we have our fourth guest for the second straight day, the PA guy at the Big 12 Pro Day. So welcome to him as well. Thanks, Adam.
No, thank you for having me on. We tried to time it, but we are recording at the same time that the DBs are now running their 40s. So we're back, and so he's back. But it's good to be on the show again, and both you guys have been on our podcast talking Saints. So let's talk Big 12. Let's talk draft. Let's get into it.
Yeah, we will, and you have some spicy Saints news, which we'll get to at the end. Shout out to Adam, by the way. Unlike DJ, like, he's a podcast professional and he has noise canceling headphones. So I think it's actually going to do a better job than DJ did, because he was afraid of the brain waves entering his mind.
Well, yeah,
do not care.
Yeah, there's an ultimate level, right, of excellence, and Adam's got it blocked out, but he's keeping what needs to be kept in as well, and so it gives us the full experience.
So one player that didn't work out there, Adam, was Shedeur Sanders. He was expected to. He's gonna work out later at a pro day. But if we're talking Big 12, to me, he's a fascinating conversation. In general, there's so many things about him that are almost conflicting. Like, you would expect him to have better traits than he really has, but he obviously has an outsized level of fame because of who his father is, because of the two college teams that he has helped to turn around as their quarterback, because of the copious amounts of tape that's out there, and because of the skill set that ultimately I think most teams do want, which is a true pocket quarterback. But does he have enough juice, do you think, to go in the top 3 of this class, top 10 in this class? Like, have we seen a quarterback like him? Between me and you, we've been calling him Andy Dalton with swag lately. Like, does Andy Dalton with swag?
It was stolen the money.
Yeah. Is Andy Dalton with swag worth taking as your franchise quarterback?
I guess my response to this, and we talked about this on our podcast, is he drastically different than Tua as a prospect? Like, Tua's a little more twitchy, right? But if you because the things that Tua was described as is like, Tua described as someone that had to win from the neck or from the shoulders up, right? And I feel like Sheduer is almost a very similar prospect. And Tua went, what, 5th, 6th? Like, he went top 10.
Went ahead of Justin Herbert.
He sure did. So, but then you look at it, Tua was surrounded by copious amounts of weapons at Alabama, a great offensive line. So I wonder if the conversation on Sheduer, if he was in a team or at a program like Alabama, if the conversation looked differently. But conversely, historically, I think he compares to players like Teddy Bridgewater, Andy Dalton, Geno Smith. And I think it's just a bigger conversation of has the NFL swung the spectrum too far in terms of trying to find the off-script play, the quarterbacks that make an off-script plays, the attributes, the Anthony Richardsons, and that's not I think of Anthony Richardson, but just that I feel like there's been a devaluation of true pocket passers. Yeah. But if you just look at it historically, recently, he just doesn't possess what teams typically draft top 10, but we did, like Bryce Young. Like, Is he drastically different than Bryce Young? I made this comparison. Bryce Young, Tua, and Sheduer. One thing that whatever you want to, like in college, the one thing that everyone says about all three of them in college is that they all have what? It. Mm-hmm. And they're all pocket passers and they all won from the shoulders up. So it's just it's going to be such a litmus test of where the league sees. But it's a risk. I do think it is a risk. But I think his floor is very high.
So in terms of evaluating that surrounding group, because I know we kind of take Travis out. Like we know what Travis brought and how excellent he is. So in the evaluation, right, of LaJohntay Western, of Horn Jr., right, of Will Shepherd, are we able to contextualize that receiving group? Because I know like with CJ Stroud, it's like, oh, he's throwing to these guys, right? Or with Mac Jones, it's like, oh, he's throwing to 3 wide receivers that could be in the top 20, right?
Right.
What are we seeing about the rest of that Colorado receiving group, and what does it say about Sheduer?
I think it says that the same, like kind of similar, like the same player you saw at Jackson State, he carried that over to a Division I program, and that's more of a testament to him. Right. It's so fascinating to me because, and I want to say this very carefully because I don't want it to feel like a knock on him. His father is one of the greatest football athletes of all time. And it feels like maybe like he didn't get the athletic genes from his dad. And so he's kind of like, if you listen to him talk, like he kind of talked about it, he's had to build himself. If he's going to win and be a successful quarterback, he has to do it and be a pure pocket passer. He knows that. And so Dan Jeremiah has talked about, he has kind of had to overcompensate for maybe not having those physical gifts. And when you watch his tape, and there's so much of it, you absolutely see it. Like his processing, when you watch his tape, it's very obvious that he can dissect a defense. And so how, like, you would think that is just a very valuable trait that NFL teams that need a quarterback would want. But there just seems to be a disconnect. And plus, like, can we keep it real? He's a young black quarterback who is sure of who he is, and he's having these meetings with GMs and these white owners, and we saw it a little bit with Caleb Williams last year, did we not? So there's also that being mixed into the equation as well.
Well, yeah, and he's made a lot of money, and he's been a big star for a while. He hasn't made a lot of money for a while, but he comes from a lot of money his whole life, and he's made a lot of money like the last couple of years. And so I think he's going in maybe with a bit of confidence. And I still believe that maybe there's some teams that he doesn't want to go to.
And also, we don't have any quotes from any of this.
Right.
Like nobody has said if something that he has done has been so egregious that it warrants reporting, nobody has said whatever he said or how he said it. It's all just been vibes and intimation that like, I don't care.
We know how Patrick, we know how the game is. Like, we keep it real. We keep it a buck. Like.
But like at the very least, if Shedeur Sanders has said something that warrants you saying that, oh, teams didn't like this, did you ask them what he said?
Yeah.
Like why do you not ask them what he said?
I like that it took Patrick to get Adam to bring out his Saints Block Party voice instead of like this NFL Daily voice he's putting on.
What a call out.
I love
vote switching. Love it.
Okay, so yeah, that's what the word I was looking for. Shedeur Sanders, though, here's the thing. You're right about the processing. You're right about that he's so sharp. He can make some great throws over the middle of the field. He doesn't have an amazing arm, but it's good enough. He's not an incredible athlete, but it's good enough. I think the idea about quarterback in 2025, to answer kind of what you were saying, Adam, is like, have we gone too far just looking for traits, guys? No, I don't think so. I just think you have to have a baseline of athleticism to even play the position. But everyone's got it. I haven't seen a prospect lately. Maybe it's Shuck actually that like doesn't have the baseline of athleticism. They've all got it. Like everyone now is at least mid-tier. None of them are Jared Goff coming out of Cal. And Jared Goff's made it work. Jared Goff has made a lot of money. So it shows, but like those guys just don't even exist in college football. And the thing about Sanders that it's really hard to unpack, and we'll move on from him, is just despite all that processing and despite the bad surroundings in terms of the offensive line and most of the receivers, he still just like holds on to the ball forever, maybe trying to make that play. And that that is sometimes not a trait that you get out of. And I think teams would want him to get out of it because the line was bad, but man, that's tough. You don't want your guy holding on to the ball that long unless you are a special athlete, and he's not. So that combination is something I think they would have to improve on at the pro level, or else he's your guy, or else he might be a little bit like your guy, Derek Carr. Who is a good athlete, actually. I would say Derek Carr coming out was a good athlete.
I would say before he the injuries and
I just mean there's some similarities there where he was always trying to hold on to the ball, but different maybe in terms of processing all that. Let's talk about other players. Yeah. I want to talk Cam Skattebo. Yes. Somehow one of the most famous players in college football has not been mentioned on NFL Daily a lot. There's opinions all over the place of where maybe he fits in as an NFL draft prospect. All along, people are like, oh, well, he's not really going to be respected by the NFL, and he's probably more of like a mid to late round type of guy. And as we get closer, I don't know, man. I think he's going to have fans, and I don't see the reason why he can't be an NFL contributor. What do you think about our guy Skattebo?
Until he works out and like the athletic testing comes back, there's just going to be those questions. During the combine, DJ compared him to Marion Barber. Like,
I like that.
Throwback Cowboys running back just invites contact. And when you watch them at Arizona State, like that's very much his playing style. And the easy thing to do would just be to just throw out any like white running back like there is to comp him to. Like that's like the thing to do. Yeah, like, oh, it's Toby Gerhart. And that's not fair to him. But one thing that I feel is a very underrated part about his game is he's very good in the receiving game. But I think those questions are still going to linger about him until he actually works out at Arizona's pro day. He didn't work out the combine. He had a nagging injury. He wasn't here. Well, originally he was on the roster here at the Big 12 pro day, but he ended up not being here. So until I think you just know how it is in terms of football and scouts, until people see like what he actually is as a quote unquote athlete, there's going to be those lingering questions in terms of what he projects to at the next level.
Yeah, it is very lazy, right, to comp like a 215, I believe, pound Cam Skattebo to like these 240 pound backs. I've heard like some fullback comps, and it's just maybe it was the cut of his jersey that are leading people to think that he's this big, like physically imposing back when he's not 6 feet, right around 215. That. Runs hard, has good speed. It's just a good running back.
I mean, his yards per after contact numbers are crazy. His missed tackles forced numbers are crazy. And I love that our guy, Maurice, is not worried about being like the rest of the draft nicks out there. He ranks Genty number 1. He ranks Travion Henderson from Ohio State number 2. And he has Skattebo as his number 3 back, ahead of guys like Quinshon Judkins, ahead of the Omarion Hampton, and he thinks he can step in and be a day one starter. Now, we've seen guys like him, actually, even that are day one starters, that are just kind of like a Rico, like maybe he's like a 2024 Rico Dowdle type from the beginning. Even those guys get taken 3rd round. Doesn't mean he's going to go high, but I think he can help a team.
Yeah, and I think a team will take a flyer on him round 3, round 4. Like it's going to happen. Like he's such a good player, and he was so productive at Arizona State that his film doesn't lie. But it's
sell some jerseys too. Yeah. Let's go.
Oh, absolutely. Those things would sell immediately.
Like not to bring up Steven the trainer again, but like he's one of 2 college players that like casuals know. Everyone asks about Skattebo. There's got to be value to that.
And everyone has an opinion about Skattebo as well. Everyone does.
So, speaking of production, I feel like Tet McMillan, because of this Travis Hunter effect, we're downrating a lot of receivers that had a lot of production. How do you view Tet McMillan if we wanted to like contextualize him with not this class?
So Tet was someone that we watched. When I say we, Ryan and I watched when we broke him down, and I felt like I came away from his film wanting, like, I went in expecting more, and I came away a little disappointed. And the player that I kept thinking about the most when I watched him, that I was completely wrong on, so it may end up being well, was I felt like I was watching Cortland Sutton at SMU, and I was completely wrong about Cortland Sutton. But Cortland Sutton has gone on to have a great career in the NFL. He went in the second round. I think the Drake London comparisons, I understand them. But I think the discourse for Tet has completely gotten a little out of control. To be honest,
what's the discourse?
Saying that now he's going to get drafted like late 20s, and I could even understand how what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of teams that have Matthew Golden, Texas wide receiver, as the wide receiver one on their boards. I get it, but like the fact that you see mocks that have Tet going in like the 20s, I think that's asinine.
Ooh, you just called Daniel Jeremiah asinine. That's tough.
I mean, that's not a side of DJ, but I think it's asinine, and because I think there's a place for. I'll use the Saints as the perfect example. I think if the Saints podcast, so if the Saints took him, he brings a hierarchy to that wide receiver room, and kind of teams like to have a basketball team for a wide receiver. They like to have someone that can go backs out, like possession. They like to have the speed guy. So they have Chris Olave. They have Rashid Shaheed. They're missing that chain mover. They're missing that 50-50 guy. Tet would bring that hierarchy. I think where teams are struggling with is he does, the separation from cornerbacks in college is a legitimate thing. And so that's why the 40 for him, I don't like to get harp on it, but for some players, the 40 is important. I felt like for him, it was important. But if you're telling me that you could be essentially drafting potentially Drake London in the draft in top 10 in this draft, are you telling me that most teams would say no to that? Greg, for instance, if the Patriots at 4 could be sure that they're drafting Drake London at 4.
Well,
would they do that?
Well, of course they would. They would do that, but he's not the prospect that Drake London was. I think he's an example of the inflation of this draft class where there's not wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. So he is in that group where it's not crazy if he gets taken in the top 10, but he could fall down to 25. Everyone's got different flavors.
I just if we're going to contextualize the quarterbacks by their surrounding talent, right? Tech McMillan had 44% of the receiving yards for Arizona last year, right?
Okay.
I think
his quarterback was.
And I think a lot of the reason that we don't see the separation at the catch point was because there wasn't the opportunity for him to do that because the ball wasn't on time. It was late.
Yeah.
And I just feel like if we had Tech McMillan in another situation, we would probably view it differently where I can't look away from the fact that nobody else was catching the ball on the team.
All I'm saying is if you look historically, T. Higgins is another guy, similar-ish mold.
I don't think it's
who I liked as a prospect a lot. He went 33rd. I know. And so you're saying T. Higgins was a much better prospect, and he was a divisive prospect at the time too. But I'm looking at that class, and Pittman goes 34, and it's a little unfair because that class was sick. And Ayuk goes 25, and Justin Jefferson goes 21. CeeDee Lamb goes 17. He's not in the class.
Sick class.
Yeah, it was also just a preposterous class, so it's not a fair one to compare to. Henry Ruggs, by the way, went ahead of all of them, and so did Jerry Jeudy. But
shout out Jalen Reagor.
He's not in that class of prospects, so that's why I don't think it's asinine for him to go in the 20s, because you're just comparing him to other positions, offensive linemen in this class, defensive edge players, and they're all kind of in one mix where it's he could go 4 if the Patriots got really crazy, or 9 if the Saints got crazy, but he also could go 25, and it's fine because he's not like that.
So let's stick with the same Tet thing. I'll say this. I've said it on my podcast, so I'm not breaking any news. on our podcast, I'm not breaking any news. Like, he's in the Saints cloud at 9. Like, if he's there at 9, there's a big
give us the rest of the Saints cloud while we're doing this.
Oh, absolutely not. Saintsblockparty.com.
No, give me a break. You come on here, you give us the good stuff.
I'm giving you one player that's in there.
He's really going to hold out.
Yeah, of course. This is how you get. I'll give you 2 offensive players, Tet and Tyler Warren. There are 2 offensive players that they're in their cloud.
Sheduer must be too. Sheduer's in there too.
Man, I think that's going to be a heated discussion if he's there at 9. I don't think it's a slam dunk. I think it would get. We talked about this, right? If like how much juice does Kellen have? If Kellen loves Sheduer, because they only have one round 1 grade on quarterback in the class, and that's Camp Ward. So they would essentially be, drafting a grade higher. They would take Sheduer at 9, which I would be for. I would understand it, but Kellen would have to essentially be saying, "That is my guy. That is my guy. I don't care if Tet's on the board. I don't care if Tyler Warren's on the board. That is my guy. That's my quarterback of the future. I can make an offense and create." And I feel Sheduer would be perfect in Kellen's offense, but that's a Kellen Moore decision, because where the draft grade is for them, he would not align.
I think he'd be a good fit. I think he is.
Yes.
Coaches always like the players that are like better versions of them, and in theory, Shedeur Sanders is a much better version of a Kellen Moore.
I just like the idea of a power struggle already between Loomis and Kellen Moore.
Well, let's get to it. Let's get to it. We'll wrap up talking a little Derek Carr. You had reported before Kellen Moore even came aboard. I mean, that he didn't necessarily want Derek Carr as his quarterback if he was going to become the coach. Derek Carr is still there. The spicier thing that I find interesting over the last handful of days is that you reported, not that the Saints are interested in trading him, because they've made it clear, the Saints, who I'll just refer to as Mickey Loomis. Mickey Loomis is the Saints. He is the Saints. He wants Derek Carr. He wants to run it back. He wants to prove that all it was last year was a bunch of injuries and this team can win. He likes Derek Carr, clearly. But you reported that maybe Derek Carr doesn't like being with the Saints.
Yeah, I reported that last Friday.
That he wouldn't mind being traded was how you put it.
He still wants to be traded. He still wants to be traded. And if you look at the breadcrumbs, I don't feel like I'm reporting anything crazy, right? Because even if you look at the report from ESPN, Jimmy Fowler, when they essentially restructured his contract to essentially be able to be active in free agency, that's, it was that back and forth. Even the podcast you did, NFL Daily, that you did with Pelissero, he also hinted that at that point they didn't know if Derek Carr was going to be back or not. Those were breadcrumbs being dropped. Jeremy Fowler reported that Derek Carr was anticipating that he was potentially looking forward to hitting the open market.
Yeah, you got better sources with the Saints than these guys.
So I didn't report anything crazy or outlandish, but it's fascinating because I know I was told that he wants to be traded. Wasn't told why he wants. But it's just a weird thing. So the head coach, before he comes on board, told the GM, "Hey, I would really not like Derek Carr to be my quarterback." Somehow in the mix, after he gets hired, the GM convinces Kellen Moore to ride with Derek Carr. And now Derek Carr is like, don't want to be the quarterback anymore. And the GM's like, but I wanted to preserve my job and save my job. And the only way I see that to be a viable route is to move forward with this quarterback that doesn't want to be here. It's already dysfunctional and the season hasn't even started yet. It's
bad. That's bad. And if I'm Derek Carr, I would want to go to any of the potential options. Number one, the Steelers. Number two, the Giants would be better, I think, for him. And at least he's played with Brian Callahan before, so he might not be feeling great vibes in New Orleans. He knows the fan base doesn't love. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
It's interesting.
Doesn't mean that it's likely to happen. It's just an interesting insight.
No, I think it does get more likely depending on that whole discussion we talked about if Shedeur's there at 9, and I think that completely changes things.
And also, Aaron Rodgers could stop playing football, And then there could be, you know, in terms of dance partners at the ball, maybe the value goes back up. Where I'm wondering who wants it more. Like Adam already covered the hypothetical benefit for Mickey Loomis to stay and have Derek Carr be successful and seeing that as a path to keeping his job. I'm not sure that there's a path for him not to have the job.
The history would prove you right, but I gotta think at some point
at some point.
Adam, I love having you on. I love Patrick bringing out the Saints block party. Adam, I love any Adam. Appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of Big 12 Pro Day, and yes, everyone check out Adam's podcast. You got the Patreon
our
there.
Podcast.
Adam,
love you.
And Ryan, Dat Boy Wolf on Twitter.
Love you guys. Appreciate you for coming on, man.
See ya, Adam. Enjoy, man. It has been a great week here on NFL Daily. We're breaking news all over the place. Jeremiah's breaking news like an insider. Adam's got some news like an insider. You got to step your game up, Patrick.
I'm gonna call all my sources. It's just y'all, so that's all I got.
All right, when we're dogged on Mickey Loomis, man, that could be any day of the week, but football is back. We'll see you next week.